The snow was falling harder than the weather report had predicted, thick white flakes swirling in the bitter December wind as I stood shivering at the bus stop on Maple Street. My breath formed small clouds in the freezing air as I checked my phone for the 100th time, 8:47 p.m. The family dinner at my daughter Jessica's house had ended over 2 hours ago, and still no sign of my son Michael's car returning to pick me up. I pulled my thin coat tighter around my shoulders, the fabric, doing little to shield me from the cold that seemed to seep into my very bones. At 72 years old, my body wasn't built for standing in sub-zero temperatures, waiting for a ride that might never come. The bus stop offered no shelter, just a small metal sign marking the route and a narrow bench that was now buried under several inches of fresh snow. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The dinner had started well. Enough. Jessica had invited the whole family to celebrate her promotion to regional manager at the marketing firm where she worked. My 3 children, Jessica, Michael, and David, had all gathered with their spouses and kids for what was supposed to be a joyful evening. I'd brought my famous apple pie, the same recipe I'd been making for their birthdays and special occasions for decades. But as the evening progressed, the conversation had taken an unexpected turn. After dessert, when the grandchildren were playing in the living room, Jessica had cleared her throat and announced she had something important to discuss. "Mom," she'd said, her voice taking on that careful, measured tone I'd learned to recognize. "Over the years, we've been talking, and we think it's time we addressed your living situation." I'd felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the winter weather outside. "My living situation? What do you mean?" Michael had jumped in then, his expression serious. "Mom, you're getting older, and that house is becoming too much for you to handle. The maintenance, the utilities, the property taxes, it's all adding up to more than your Social Security can cover." "I'm managing just fine," I'd protested, though we all knew it wasn't entirely true. Since my husband, Robert, had passed away 3 years ago, money had indeed been tight. His pension had stopped, and I was living primarily on Social Security and the small savings we'd managed to accumulate over 45 years of marriage. David, my youngest at 38, had leaned forward with what he probably thought was a sympathetic expression. "We found a really nice assisted living facility about an hour from here. Sunset Manor. It's got great reviews, and they have an opening next month." Assisted living? The words had hit me like a physical blow. I don't need assisted living. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. Are you, though? Jessica's tone had grown sharper. "Last month, you forgot to pay the electric bill, and the power got shut off. 2 weeks ago, you called me crying because you couldn't figure out how to reset the thermostat when it stopped working." "Those were simple mistakes," I'd said, my voice growing defensive. "Everyone has moments like that." "Mom, be realistic," Michael had said, pulling out his phone and swiping through what looked like photos. "Look at these pictures I took when I was over at your house last week. The gutters are falling off. There's a leak stain on the kitchen. Ceiling and half the floorboards in the hallway are warped. The place is falling apart around you." I'd glanced at the photos, feeling a familiar shame wash over me. It was true that the house needed work that I couldn't afford and physically couldn't do myself. But it was my home, the place where Robert and I had raised our 3 children, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, where I'd nursed them through illnesses and helped them with homework. "We're not trying to be mean," David had added, though his words felt anything but kind. "We're trying to help you. The facility has 24-hour nursing care, organized activities, and you wouldn't have to worry about cooking or cleaning, or any of that stuff anymore." "What about my things?" I'd asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "My furniture, my photos, Robert's books." "You can bring some personal items," Jessica had said dismissively. "But obviously you can't take everything." We've already talked to an estate sale company. They'll handle selling most of it. That's when the real punch to the gut had come. And don't worry about the house, Michael had continued, not meeting my eyes. We've spoken to a realtor with the location and the lot size. Even in its current condition, it should sell for around $300,000. After we pay off the remaining mortgage and cover the fees, there'll be enough left over to pay for your care at Sunset Manor for several years. You've already spoken to a realtor? I'd stood up so quickly that my chair had scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. Without even asking me? Mom, please sit down, Jessica had said, glancing nervously toward the living room where her children were playing. We didn't want to get your hopes up if it wasn't feasible. Get my hopes up? For what? To be warehoused in some facility while you sell off everything your father and I worked for our entire lives? The room had fallen silent except for the sound of my grandson Tommy's toy truck vrooming across the coffee table in the next room. My 3 children had exchanged glances, the kind of wordless communication they'd perfected as teenagers when they were plotting something I wouldn't approve of. Look, Mom, Michael had finally said, his patience clearly wearing thin. This isn't really a discussion. It's what's going to happen. We've already put down a deposit at Sunset Manor, and the realtor is coming to look at the house next Tuesday. This isn't really a discussion? I'd repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. About my life? My home? My future? You're being dramatic, David had said, rolling his eyes in a gesture that reminded me painfully of his teenage years. It's not like we're abandoning you. We'll visit and you'll be much safer and more comfortable. Safer? I'd laughed, though there was no humor in it. Safer than in the home where I've lived for 37 years? The home where I know every creak in the floorboards and every switch on the wall? The home where you could fall and break. A hip and lie there for hours before anyone found you, Jessica had shot back. The home where you could forget to turn off the stove and burn the whole place down. That's when I'd realized what was really happening. This wasn't about my safety or my comfort. This was about them getting their hands on the money from the house sale. $300,000 split 3 ways. A nice little windfall for each of them while they conveniently solved the problem of having to worry about their aging mother. I see what this is really about, I'd said quietly, my voice shaking with a combination of hurt and growing anger. This isn't about helping me. This is about the money. That's not fair, David had protested, but the flush in his cheeks told a different story, isn't it? You've already calculated exactly how much the house will sell for, haven't you? Already figured out how long the money will last to pay for my care. What happens when it runs out, kids? When Sunset Manor comes looking for more money in 5 or 6 years? None of them had answered that question. I'll tell you what happens, I'd continued, my voice growing stronger as my anger built. You'll start looking for a cheaper place. Some place with fewer amenities and lower quality care. And when that money runs out too, you'll find an even cheaper place. Until eventually I end up in some state-run facility where they warehouse old people to die. Mom, you're being ridiculous, Jessica had said, but her voice lacked conviction. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've planned out my entire future without once asking what I want. You've made appointments with realtors and put down deposits and calculated the dollars and cents of my life, but not one of you has asked me how I feel about any of this. The conversation had deteriorated rapidly from there. Voices had been raised, old grievances had been aired, and the grandchildren had eventually been shuffled off to watch TV in the basement to escape the growing tension. By the time Michael had declared that he was taking me home, the atmosphere in the house could have been cut with a knife. But instead of driving me home, he'd dropped me off at the bus stop with a curt, "The number 12 runs until 10. It'll take you right to your street." And now here I was, standing in the snow, watching my breath fog in the frigid air as I waited for a bus that, according to the schedule, should have come and gone 20 minutes ago. My fingers were going numb despite my gloves, and I could feel the cold seeping through the soles of my shoes. A car drove by, its headlights cutting through the falling snow, but it didn't slow down. Then another. And another. Normal people were home with their families on this bitter December night, warm and safe and loved. Normal people weren't standing alone at bus stops, abandoned by the very children they'd raised and sacrificed for. I thought about the years I'd spent putting my children first, the times I'd gone without so they could have new clothes for school or take music lessons or play sports. The way Robert and I had scrimped and saved to help pay for their college, educations, taking out a second mortgage on the house to cover what scholarships and financial aid didn't. The countless nights I'd stayed up when they were sick, the driving lessons and the college visits and the help with down payments on their first homes. Where had it gotten me? Standing in the snow like a discarded piece of furniture. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, my heart leaped, thinking maybe one of them had reconsidered. Maybe Michael was coming back to get me. But when I looked at the screen, it was just a notification from my bank about my account balance. That's when something clicked in my mind. My account balance. They thought they knew about my finances, thought they had me figured out down to the last penny. They'd seen the bills piling up, the small checking account balance, the struggle to keep up with house maintenance on a fixed income. But what they didn't know, what I'd never told them, was about the other account, the one Robert had set up 25 years ago when his brother's construction company had been bought out by a larger firm. Robert's share of the sale had been substantial, nearly $500,000, and instead of spending it or even telling the kids about it, we'd put it into a separate account at a different bank. Our emergency fund, we'd called it. Money for a rainy day that never came. After Robert died, I'd left the account untouched. It felt somehow wrong to spend money he'd worked so hard to save, money he'd intended for our golden years together. But standing in that bus stop, shivering and abandoned, I realized that this was exactly the kind of emergency we'd been saving for. The bus finally arrived, nearly 40 minutes late, its brakes hissing as it pulled up to the stop. The doors opened with a pneumatic whoosh, and I climbed aboard, my legs stiff from standing in the cold for so long. The driver, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, took one look at me and shook her head. "Honey, you look frozen solid," she said, as I fumbled for my fare. "Somebody leave you out there?" "My family," I said simply, the words carrying more weight than she could possibly understand. She studied my face for a moment, then waved away the money I was trying to hand her. "This one's on me. You just find yourself a warm seat and thaw. Out." As the bus pulled away from the stop, I settled into a seat near the front and watched the snow continue to fall outside the windows. The heater was working overtime, and gradually I began to feel sensation returning to my fingers and toes. But the cold inside me, the chill that had nothing to do with the weather, remained. By the time I reached my street, I had made a decision. If my children wanted to treat me like a problem to be solved, like a burden to be managed, then perhaps it was time to show them exactly what kind of problem I could become. They thought they had my life all figured out, thought they could manipulate me into their preferred solution because they believed I had no other options. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I unlocked the front door of my house. My house, not theirs to sell, and stepped inside. The familiar smells of home welcomed me back. The lingering scent of the pine candle I'd lit that morning, the faint aroma of the soup I'd made for lunch, the old house smell of wood and time and memories. Tomorrow I would start making some phone calls. I would speak to my banker about the account Robert had set up, the one with enough money to change everything. I would call a lawyer about protecting my assets and my rights, and then, when I was ready, I would have a conversation with my children. That would turn their neat little plans upside down. They wanted to play hardball with their mother's life? Fine. But they were about to discover that the woman who had raised them, who had taught them everything they knew about determination and persistence, still had a few lessons left to teach. The game was about to change, and this time, I would be the one making the rules. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, sunlight streaming through my bedroom windows and casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. For the first time in months, I woke up with a sense of purpose that had been missing since Robert's death. The anger from the previous night had crystallized into something more useful: determination. I made myself a proper breakfast for the first time in weeks: scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. As I ate, I pulled out the small wooden box where Robert had kept our important papers: birth certificates, insurance policies, the deed to the house, and tucked away in the very back, the documents for the account at First National that my children knew nothing about. The account number was still there, written in Robert's careful handwriting on a small card paper clip to the original deposit slip. $487,000 had been the initial deposit back in 1998. With 25 years of compound interest, even at conservative rates, it had to be worth considerably more now. I picked up the phone and dialed the bank's customer service line. After navigating through the automated system, I was connected to a pleasant-sounding young man named Marcus. "Mrs. Patterson? Yes, I can help you with that account. Let me just verify some information with you first." After I'd answered his security questions, there was a pause as he pulled up my records. "Oh my, Mrs. Patterson, I'm showing a current balance of $702 and $318.47. This account has been earning interest for quite some time without any withdrawals. $742,000. The number hit me like a physical force. I had to ask him to repeat it twice before it really sank in. "Mrs. Patterson, are you still there?" "Yes, I'm here. I'd like to make an appointment to come in and discuss this account. Today, if possible." "Of course. How does 2 o'clock this afternoon sound?" After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table staring at that piece of paper with Robert's handwriting. Nearly $750,000. Money that my children had no idea existed. Money that changed everything. But before I did anything else, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with regarding the house and my legal rights. I called Elizabeth Morrison, the lawyer who had handled Robert's will and our estate planning. She was semi-retired now, but still took on occasional clients. "Margaret, how wonderful to hear from you. How are you holding up, dear?" I gave her a brief overview of what had happened the night before, careful to stick to the facts without letting too much emotion creep into my voice. There was a long pause when I finished. "Margaret, I have to ask, do you have this conversation recorded in any way? Text messages, emails, anything documenting what they said about already talking to realtors and putting down deposits without your consent?" No, it was just dinner conversation." "Well, that's unfortunate, but not insurmountable. Here's what you need to know. As long as you're mentally competent, and you clearly are, no one can force you to sell your home or move into assisted living. The fact that they've already taken steps without your consent is actually quite problematic. From a legal standpoint, especially if they've used your personal information to get quotes or make inquiries." She paused, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. "I'm going to recommend we take some immediate protective steps. First, I want you to revoke any power of attorney documents you might have signed giving any of your children authority over your affairs." "I did sign something like that when Robert was sick," I admitted. "Michael said it would make things easier if something happened to me too." "We'll revoke that immediately. Second, I want to put together a comprehensive estate plan that reflects your actual wishes, not what your children assume they should be. And third, we should probably look into whether their actions constitute elder abuse or fraud." Elder abuse. The words hung in the air like a slap. Is that really what this is? "Margaret, financial exploitation of elderly family members is one of the most common forms of elder abuse. The fact that they're pressuring you to make major life decisions that benefit them financially, especially while withholding information and making arrangements without your consent, yes, that could very well qualify." We scheduled an appointment for the next morning. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. Vindication that my instincts about their motives had been correct, but sadness that it had come to this with my own children. At exactly 2 o'clock, I walked into First National Bank. Marcus turned out to be a young man in his early 30s, with an earnest face and a firm handshake. He led me to a small office and closed the door. "Mrs. Patterson, I have to say, this is quite an impressive account. Your husband was clearly a very prudent investor. The money has been in a mix of CDs and conservative mutual funds, and it's grown quite nicely over the years." He pulled out a detailed statement showing the account's history. The growth had been steady and substantial, exactly what Robert had hoped for when he'd set it up. "Now, what can I help you with today? Are you looking to make some withdrawals?" "Actually, I want to discuss moving the money, all of it, to a different bank entirely." Marcus's eyebrows rose slightly. "May I ask why? We've maintained this account for 25 years, and we'd hate to lose your business. Let's just say I want to ensure that certain people don't accidentally discover its existence," I said carefully. He nodded with understanding. "I see. Well, we can certainly help you with that. There are several ways we could handle a transfer of this size." We spent the next hour going over options. Marcus recommended splitting the money between 2 different banks, one a national chain, the other a smaller regional bank, that specialized in wealth management for retirees. We could set up the transfers to happen gradually over the next few weeks to avoid triggering any automatic reporting requirements that might create a paper trail my children could stumble across. "One more thing," I said as we wrapped up. "I want to set up automatic monitoring on all my credit reports and financial accounts. If anyone tries to access information about my finances or use my personal information without my permission, I want to know about it immediately." Smart thinking. Identity theft and financial fraud targeting seniors is unfortunately very common, often by family members who think they're entitled to make decisions or access accounts. As I drove home, I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time since Robert's death, I had options. Real options, not the limited choices my children had tried to present me with. That evening, Jessica called. Her tone was carefully neutral, the voice she used when she was trying to manage a difficult client at work. "Hi, Mom. I wanted to call and apologize for how things went last night. I know the conversation was difficult, but I hope you understand. We're just trying to help." "Help," I repeated flatly. "Yes. And I wanted to let you know that the realtor will be coming by tomorrow at 10 to take a look at the house. His name is Craig Mendelson, and he's very good. He specializes in properties that need some work." My grip tightened on the phone. "Jessica, I never agreed to have a realtor look at my house." "Mom, we talked about this. You can't keep living there, and we need to understand what we're working with financially. Craig is just going to give us a preliminary assessment. Cancel it." "What?" "Cancel the appointment. I'm not selling my house." There was a long pause. "Mom, be reasonable. We've already discussed this. The house is too much for you, and you need the money for your care." I said cancel it, Jessica. I mean it. "Fine." Her voice had gone cold. "But we're not giving up on this. We'll talk again when you've had time to think rationally." She hung up without saying goodbye. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it was Michael. "Mom," Jessica called me. "What's this about refusing to meet with the realtor?" "It's about the fact that it's my house, and I didn't agree to sell it." "Look, I get that this is emotional for you, but you're not thinking clearly. David and I are coming over tomorrow morning to help you understand the numbers. Once you see how much debt you're carrying and how little income you have coming in, you'll realize we're trying to help you avoid financial disaster. Don't come over here, Michael. We're coming at 9. We'll bring all the paperwork, your bills, your income statements, everything. You need to see this in black and white. Michael, I'm telling you not to come. 9 o'clock, Mom. We'll see." "You then?" He hung up too. I sat in my living room, looking around at the furniture Robert and I had collected over the decades, at the photos of our children at various stages of their lives, at the books he'd loved and the paintings we'd bought. On our anniversary trips, they thought they could just sweep all of this away, package it up and sell it off like it meant nothing. But what really struck me was how they'd talk to me. Not like a person with rights and feelings and opinions, but like a problem to be managed. Like a child who didn't understand what was good for her. I thought about Robert, about what he would say if he could see what our children had become. He'd been so proud of them, so sure we'd raised them to be good people. What would he think of this conversation? Of their willingness to manipulate and pressure and override my wishes for their own convenience? That night, I called Elizabeth. Morrison at home. Elizabeth, I'm sorry to bother you in the evening, but they're escalating things. Jessica had a realtor scheduled to come look at my house tomorrow without my permission, and Michael and David are planning to come over to help me understand the numbers of my financial situation. Margaret, listen to me very carefully. Do not let them into your house tomorrow. Do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything. And do not give them access to any of your financial information. In fact, I want you to consider whether you feel safe having them come over at all. Safe. The word stopped me cold. You think they might... they're my children. Margaret, financial elder abuse often escalates when the victim starts to resist. I'm not saying they'd hurt you physically, but emotional manipulation, intimidation, even threats aren't uncommon. If you don't feel comfortable having them in your home, you have every right to refuse. After we hung up, I double-checked that all my doors were locked and turned on the front porch light. Then I sat down and wrote out a timeline of everything that had happened, everything they'd said, every action they'd taken without my consent. Elizabeth was right. I needed to document everything. As I wrote, patterns emerged that I hadn't seen before. The way Michael had started coming by more frequently over the past few months, always asking about bills and expenses. The way Jessica had begun making comments about the house being too much for me. The way David had started bringing up stories about elderly people who'd been taken advantage of by repair companies or financial scams. They'd been building a case, constructing a narrative of me as incompetent and vulnerable, setting the stage for exactly what had happened at dinner the night before. But what they didn't realize was that I'd been taking notes too. Not intentionally, but every bill they'd seen, every repair they'd criticized, every comment about my declining abilities. I remembered all of it. And now, I could see it for what it really was, a campaign to undermine my confidence and independence. Well, the campaign was about to backfire spectacularly. I pulled out my laptop, the one David had given me last Christmas while making jokes, about whether I'd be able to figure out how to use it, and started researching elder law attorneys who specialized in financial abuse cases. I read articles about family financial exploitation, about the warning signs and legal remedies available. By midnight, I had a plan, not just for protecting myself, but for showing my children exactly what happened when you underestimated Margaret Patterson. Tomorrow, when they showed up at my door expecting to find a confused, vulnerable old woman ready to be managed, they were going to get the surprise of their lives. I was ready for them. At exactly 9 o'clock Tuesday morning, I heard Michael's car pull into my driveway, followed by the slam of 2 doors. Through my kitchen window, I watched my sons approach. The front door, Michael carrying a thick manila folder and David holding what looked like a laptop bag. They moved with the confident stride of men who believed they were about to solve a problem. The doorbell rang. I let it ring again before walking slowly to the front door, taking my time to unlock the deadbolt and chain that I'd installed just that morning. "Mom," Michael said as the door opened, his smile forced but determined. "Good morning. We brought everything we need to go over your finances. I told you not to come," I said quietly, not moving aside to let them in. Come on, Mom, David said, shifting the laptop bag to his other hand. We're here to help. Just let us in for a few minutes. I stepped back slightly, but didn't invite them inside. Help with what exactly? Michael held up the manila folder. We've pulled together all your financial information. Bills, income statements, property assessments. Once you see the numbers laid out clearly, you'll understand why we need to make these changes now, before things get worse. All my financial information? I raised an eyebrow. That's interesting. Tell me, Michael, how exactly did you get access to my private financial records? He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Well, when Dad was sick, you gave me power of attorney, remember? I've been monitoring your accounts to make sure everything was okay. I see. And you, David? Have you been monitoring my accounts too? David shrugged. Michael keeps us updated. We're worried about you, Mom. The numbers don't lie. I finally stepped aside and let them into the living room, but I remained standing while they settled onto the couch. Michael immediately opened his folder and began spreading papers across my coffee table with the efficiency of a businessman making a presentation. Okay, he said, pulling out a yellow legal pad covered with his handwriting. Let's start with your monthly income. Social Security gives you $1,147 per month. Dad's life insurance policy paid out $50,000 3 years ago, but that's almost gone now. Your checking account currently has $2,340 in it, and your savings account has $8,706. He looked up at me expectantly, as if waiting for me to be impressed by his thoroughness. Your monthly expenses, he continued, are running about $2,400. Property taxes, utilities, groceries, medical costs, house maintenance. You're spending more than you're bringing in every single month, Mom. At this rate, you'll be completely broke within 2 years. David opened his laptop and turned it toward me. We've put together a spreadsheet showing your projected finances over the next 5 years. Look at this line here. That's your account balance over time. It goes negative in 18 months. I studied their faces as they waited for my reaction. They looked so pleased with themselves, so confident in their analysis, like accountants who just solved a particularly challenging problem. This is very thorough, I said finally. You've clearly put a lot of work into this. We have, Michael said, relief evident in his voice. We know it's hard to hear, but the numbers don't lie. That's why the assisted living option makes so much sense. The money from selling the house will cover your care costs, and you won't have to worry about any of this anymore. And what happens when that money runs out? David waved a hand dismissively. That's years away. We'll figure something out when the time comes. Will you? I sat down in my recliner, the one Robert had bought me for my 60th birthday. What exactly will you figure out, David? Another facility? A cheaper one? Mom, you're borrowing trouble, Michael said. Let's focus on solving the immediate problem. The immediate problem, I repeated slowly. You mean the problem of me living independently in my own home? The problem of you heading toward financial disaster, he corrected. Look, I know this is emotional for you, but emotion doesn't pay bills. I nodded thoughtfully. You're absolutely right. Emotion doesn't pay bills. Facts do. Numbers do. So let me share some numbers with you. I reached into the drawer of the side table next to my chair and pulled out the bank statements I'd printed that morning. Both of my sons leaned forward. Confused expressions on their faces? You see, Michael, you're right that you've been monitoring my accounts, the ones you know about. But what you don't know is that your father was a much better financial planner than either of us ever let on. I handed Michael the first statement. His eyes scanned the page, and I watched his face change as he processed what he was seeing. What? What is this? That's a statement from First National Bank, an account your father opened 25 years ago when his brother's construction company was sold. The current balance, as you can see, is $742,318. David nearly knocked over his laptop, lunging to see the paper. That's impossible. Dad never mentioned any account like this. Your father was a private man about money. He believed in keeping our financial business to ourselves. Apparently, he was wise to do so. Michael's face had gone completely white. Mom, why didn't you tell us about this? Because it wasn't your business. And given what's happened over the past few days, I'd say Robert's instincts were correct. I pulled out the second set of papers. These are the transfer confirmations. As of yesterday afternoon, that money has been moved to 2 different banks, where it will be much more secure. The silence in the room was deafening. David stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language, while Michael's mouth opened and closed without any sound coming out. So you see, I continued, conversationally, your financial analysis, while thorough, was based on incomplete information. I'm not facing financial ruin. I'm not unable to maintain my home, and I'm certainly not in need of your assistance in managing my affairs. $700,000, David whispered. Jesus Christ, Mom. Why would you let us worry about, you like this? Why would you let us think you were struggling? Let you think? My voice sharpened. David, at what point in the last 3 years did either of you ask me about my financial situation? When did you inquire whether I needed help or whether I was managing okay? You didn't ask. You assumed. You saw some bills on my counter and decided you understood my entire financial picture. Michael had found his voice again. But Mom, this changes everything. With that kind of money, you could afford the best care facilities in the state. You could live anywhere you want. You're right. I could. And I choose to live here, in my own home. But why? David's voice rose in frustration. Why struggle with maintenance and repairs and all the hassles of home ownership when you could have people taking care of everything for you? I looked at him for a long moment. David, this house isn't a burden to me. It's my home. Every room holds memories of your father, of raising you children, of 40 years of life and love and family. Why would I want to trade that for some sterile facility where I'd be just another elderly resident? Because it would be easier, Michael said. Safer. Easier for whom? I asked quietly. Michael, answer me honestly. Was any part of your plan for my future motivated by wanting to make things easier for yourselves? He shifted uncomfortably on the couch. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. Having me safely tucked away in an assisted living facility means you don't have to worry about getting calls when something breaks down. It means you don't have to feel guilty about not visiting very often. It means you can stop thinking about whether your elderly mother is okay because you've paid someone else to think about it for you. That's not fair, David protested. Isn't it? Tell me, when was the last time either of you visited me just because you wanted to spend time with me? Not because you were checking up on my bills or my house maintenance, but just because you enjoyed my company? Neither of them answered. And while we're being honest, I continued, let's talk about the other elephant in the room. You've been planning my future based on the assumption that when I die, there won't be much of an inheritance left. All the money would have gone to pay for my care. But now that you know about this account, I'm curious. Has your opinion about my living arrangements changed? Michael's face flushed red. Mom, we weren't thinking about inheritance. No? Then you won't mind if I tell you that. I've decided to update my will. With Elizabeth Morrison's help, I'm setting up a charitable trust. When I die, the bulk of my estate will go to organizations that help elderly people who are actually being abused and exploited by their families. The color drained from both their faces. You can't be serious, David said. I'm completely serious. I've seen how quickly you were willing to override my wishes and make decisions about my life without my consent. I've seen how you assumed you knew what was best for me without ever asking what I wanted. Do you really think I want to reward that behavior? Michael stood up abruptly, the papers on the coffee table scattering. This is insane. We're your children. We were trying to help you. You were trying to manage me, I corrected. There's a difference. So what now? David demanded. You're just going to cut us off completely? Punish us for caring about you? I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting myself. And I'm making it clear that my life, my home, and my finances are my decisions to make. I stood up and walked to the front door, opening it wide. Now I think it's time for you to leave. And Michael? I'm revoking that power of attorney. Elizabeth Morrison will be in touch with the appropriate paperwork. Michael gathered up his scattered papers with shaking hands. Mom, you're making a huge mistake. What if something happens to you? What if you fall or get sick or need help? Then I'll handle it. The same way I've been handling everything else since your father died. They walked to the door in stunned silence. David paused on the threshold and turned back to me. What about Jessica? Are you going to tell her about the money? Jessica made her feelings about my future quite clear at dinner Sunday night. She's welcome to live with the consequences of her assumptions, just like you are. After they left, I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. The confrontation had been even more satisfying than I'd imagined. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like myself again, not the helpless widow they'd been trying to manage, but Margaret Patterson, a woman perfectly capable of running her own life. But I knew this was just the beginning. My children weren't the type to accept defeat gracefully, especially now that they knew about the money. They'd regroup, recalculate, and come back with a new strategy. The difference was, now I was ready for them. And I had resources they'd never imagined. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.